course, it's like the one Google Docs form I don't even have up. There we go. Okay. Welcome back, Frill Nation, to another episode of OK Bloomer. Finally in, what is it, May? Alright, yeah, I kind of took 2 months off. Sorry. But I'm finally getting back to the history of series and hitting on what I think is one of the most important things to Lolita fashion and culture as a whole, and that is the movie and book Kamikaze Girls or Shimotsuma Story. I find that most fashion subcultures have a sort of like key film or book that they really like kind of glom onto that really sort of represents the culture as a whole in a way, or at least has enough like inside jokes and calling cards that it feels familiar and sort of resonates with the people in the fashion. For punk fashion, I find usually that's SLC Punk, which is, it's actually a pretty good film if you haven't seen it. Goths basically have the entire Tim Burton library at this point. Raver kids have, I guess they have Groove, which is probably kind of obscure. Maybe that was just me. I don't know. But for Lolitas, we have Kamikaze Girls. It is known as Kamikaze Girls in the West, but it was originally released as Shimotsuma Story, or in the full Japanese, Shimotsuma Monogatari. So the general premise is Momoko, our protagonist, she's living out in Shimotsuma, which is basically BFE in Ibaraki Prefecture. Just kind of a backwater country area with her ex-Yakuza dad and her ex-biker grandma. Grandma, by the way, is the best character. Her parents got divorced when she was around 6 years old. Her mother was having an affair with a rich doctor at the time, and Momoko chose to stay with her dad. Momoko is, she refers to herself as a rococo-phile, meaning she only will do what makes her feel good or what makes her happy, regardless of the cost or inconvenience. Many of the examples is she will only wear maybe the Stars Shine Bright, which as soon as they move to Shimotsuma means a roughly 2.5-hour day trip by train to Daikaniyama, where the boutique is. She also only wears Vivienne Westwood Rocking Horse shoes, which, guess what? This is the movie that you get to blame for everyone's low-key obsession with Rocking Horse shoes. So this is the book in the film that you can blame all that on. She only wears Lolita outside of her school uniform, and she specifically will only wear Be the Stars Shine Bright, although in the film there are a few scenes where she's actually wearing Metamorphose or Jane Marple, but you know, we're just splitting hairs here. So why they moved to Shimotsuma? Her dad was exiled from the Yakuza after convincing his boss to produce and try to sell copyright infringing clothing, specifically dual branding Versace and Universal Studios on items to drive up the market. It was selling well until Universal Studios found out and got mad and, you know, basically sent a cease and desist saying, if you keep it up, we are going to sue. And Universal Studios, if you for some reason don't know, they have a lot of money. Like a lot. To punish him for these transgressions and for getting them in all this trouble, the traditional punishment is, of course, to cut off his pinky finger. But he panics and gets out of it, and so instead they're like, all right, well then you're out. And they kick him out, and his only choice is to run by going to go live with his mother, Momoko's grandma, out in Shimotsuma. She also has an issue then. So how would a high schooler make money? So what Momoko would do is she would constantly just make up stories about sick classmates or dying classmates' parents, etc. to get money from her dad. But because he no longer had a business that was booming, i.e. the counterfeit market, you know, he didn't have the same amount of money, and so she had to come up with her own way of continuing to support herself, I guess. So because Momoko no longer has the same amount of money that she was getting from her dad previously, she decides to take all of his knockoff stuff and advertise it in a magazine, because she always noticed that a lot of like the Yanki biker girls were the ones who were buying all of this stuff. So then finally one day she gets a letter from a Yanki who says, hey, I'm not that far from you. I live in Shimotsuma. I can come by and look at the stuff. I need a few things. So she says, all right. The letter is kind of, she even mentions like the letter's gross. It's, you know, the handwriting's terrible. The spelling's inconsistent. And so she says, all right, come on over. We'll do this. And that's how she meets Ichiko. She's a total Yankee biker badass. And a complete idiot. From here, our story kicks off. Mostly Ichigo, just after that initial meeting, she just kind of keeps coming around to hang out with Momoko. Momoko at first is like, I don't need a friend. I just want to do my own thing. I don't need someone to hang out with. Leave me alone. All you did was buy one thing one time. You just keep coming back. But Ichiko she's stubborn and also just too stupid to really realize, like, she's forcing the friendship. You're forcing it, Ichiko. What are you doing? So at one point, because Momoko doesn't necessarily have a lot of money, at one point, Ichiko convinces Momoko to go into town with her so they can play pachinko together, which, if you're not familiar, pachinko is a gambling game. It's sort of like, basically you're following a bunch of steel BBs, I guess, through a pegboard maze, and if you manage to get a bunch of them to go into a specific gate, then you can win prizes. It's essentially like, it's the Japanese slot machine, where you're constantly gambling on, all right, they're gonna go all into this slot, blah, blah, blah. Ichiko plays pachinko a lot. She's very bad at it. Momoko apparently is some sort of wunderkind. Like, no one knows why, I can't explain it. Unfortunately, Momoko, being good at pachinko and winning all this money, draws the attention of the management of the establishment, who accuses them of using cards or some other method of cheating. And that is how we meet Ichiko's love interest, this other Yanki Yakuza guy with the greatest shoes in the planet. So. Honestly, this is one of the things that I really love about the movie, especially because it's not very heavy on story. Like, it's surface level. It's very, I don't know, there's not a lot of story to it. It's basically a story of two girls becoming friends, and especially the book, when you read it, it's just very surface level. It's not very deep. It's not trying to say anything too profound. And so a movie without the eccentric characters that we get just wouldn't hit the same. If everyone was rather boring or realistic, it wouldn't be as fun of a movie. Like, it feels very goofy. It feels very anime because everyone is so animated and over the top caricatures. Except Momoko's kind of what would be called the straight man in comedic tropes, or the comedic foil. So she's sort of our baseline character. She's sort of our point of view character. She's the one who kind of helps set up jokes, or also just reacts to the weird situations she finds herself in, like in the pachinko parlor. She, despite the fact that she's the most outlandishly dressed, she's also sort of, in personality, our baseline. I really kind of compare Momoko and Ichiko mentally to, if you've seen the anime The Disastrous Life of Saiki K. Momoko is very much like the main character Saiki, in which she's, very closed off, very isolated from the world, introverted, and not even like shy of people, but just doesn't seek a connection with them, doesn't want people to get close, doesn't have a need for it. Whereas Ichiko is very much like Nendo, who's very much seen as scary, kind of terrifying. Nendo is very much like Himbo, and so Ichiko's the female version of that, which isn't really bimbo. It's the female version of himbo. It's specifically different in my mind, mentally. But yeah, so she's just an unrelenting goofball idiot who has a pure heart. is just trying to crack through Ichiko's shell any way she can.
なんで私が行くの？どっちだろうがよ。これください。
お、いらいらのじゃあキャベツ1個おかげありがとう。
今日からこれがあなたのダチです。あなたのダチはこの人です。じゃあ。
Anyway, the whole reason they do go to Pachinko in the first place is because Ichiko is trying to save up to get some embroidery done on her Kamikaze jacket by a legendary embroiderer named Emma. And it's thousands of dollars, essentially. So they go to Pachinko to try and win a bunch of money. Momoko ends up winning the money. And then after that... Fuck, I'm not following my script at all. And then with their winnings, they end up going to Baby the Stars Shine Bright so that Momoko can, you know, sort of buy some new items for her wardrobe. And while there, she actually gets noticed by the shop girl and Isobe himself for altering one of her bonnets because it had gotten chewed on by mice. It had some holes in it, so she turned it into a really cute, sweet little embroidery pattern on the side of the bonnet so it would look more intentional and like a cutout embroidery. So then after that, all gassed up from this interaction with Isobe where he compliments her work, Momoko and Ichiko go around Daikaniyama trying to find Emma. They end up having a fight. After their fight, when they're kind of cooling off, Momoko offers to do Ichiko's embroidery on her jacket for her. And that's where we start to see that Ichiko has definitely sort of gotten through Momoko's shell. Momoko spends an entire, 2 days or something embroidering this jacket, working on it almost non-stop, just to make sure that it's the best work that she can do. And I think it's really sweet. I think that's definitely a subtle way of showing that, yes, Momoko does sort of want to make connections with people, but she's reluctant to. And I think in a way that she is choosing to replace human interaction with clothing. And that's not the healthiest way to live. It's very much just a response. It could just be a delayed response to sort of her crappy childhood. I don't know, I'm going on a tangent here. Anyway, she gives the jacket back to Ichiko. It's beautiful. And Ichiko needed it to wear to her gang leaders last night with the gang because she was graduating or retiring and going to go get married. And it turns out she was also already pregnant. But she's going to get married to the guy who saved them at the pachinko parlor.
女はさ、人の前で泣いちゃいけないんだよな。うん。でも、今ここには誰もいないよ。And she said, life is getting better now. Just said, life is getting better.
I really hate this scene. The climax of the movie is a fight at the giant Buddha. I mean, just because it's a girl movie doesn't mean it's not going to have some Tarantino-esque giant, battle royale at the end. Ichiko is essentially, she's leaving her biking gang. She hasn't been going to the meetings that they hold. She just hasn't enjoyed it as much, especially since her boss Akimi left. She just isn't getting the same enjoyment out of it that she was, and she'd rather just be on her own than continuing to hang out with these people who she no longer feels a connection with. You do see this from time to time in the Lolita community, where someone just isn't feeling their local community, they have a falling out with some people, and they choose to do their own thing. There's nothing wrong with that, obviously. Unfortunately, the gang decides to issue Ichiko an ultimatum if she's going to leave. They give her a challenge, which consists of...
基本的にあれやな、一般的なやつはこの集団リンチやな。こう手くくってな、両手くくってこうチェーンで巻いて、その先っぽをバイクのケツつけてな、ブワー飛ばされるわけ。ぐわーと怖いぞ。うん。あとな、簡単なやつあるちゃうか。根性焼きやな。タバコ10や。 なんか丸くツルツルなるわ。あと痛いんやったらな、これ手でお前鼻鉛筆だ。鉛筆鼻に入れられてこうなる。グワーいかれんねん。ならー女やったらあれちゃうか、カミソリで顔ズタズタとかな、いやお嫁に行けませんだって思い出すな。若さってええの。
And they're doing this because they want to test her loyalty to the gang. Now, unfortunately, when Momoko finds out about this, it's the same day that she's supposed to be meeting with Isobe because he had commissioned her to embroider a specific dress for a photo shoot. And she's supposed to be going back to drop the dress off so they have it in time for the photo shoots. But she's torn because she understands that Ichiko, who she has developed a connection with and has developed feelings for, whether those are romantic or platonic, which has been a debate on the group, that now she feels conflicted that she has to save her friend. And Isobe gives her a bit of a pep talk, like, you can choose fashion, you can come and follow these obligations, but ultimately, if you're going to choose this path, you may find yourself very lonely if you consistently choose work over friends. So Momoko dusts off her grandma's ancient scooter and goes to help Ichiko out at the giant Buddha. It's a pretty great scene. Momoko drops some absolute bombs on the Yanki girls. She brings up Emma, claims that she is the daughter of Emma and a famous mysterious biker named Himiko, using her embroidery on Ichiko's jacket as an example of her work. And the gang is so shook by this that they decide, okay, yeah, we don't want to offend essentially a god character in their following, and they would rather just let Ichiko go on her way and not mess with her and just accept it. And that's how Ichiko and Momoko kind of save each other. Ichiko saves Momoko from honestly living a very lonely and isolated life, and Momoko saves Ichiko from getting her shit wrecked by a bunch of other bikers. In the end, everything turns out great for them. Momoko's embroidery goes over super well with Isobe. The photo shoot, they actually had Ichiko model for it. She had caught the eye of a cameraman, and they wanted to use her as the model for the embroidered dress, which goes very well for everyone involved.
撮影でカメラが2台壊され、カメラマンを含む5人の大人が顔に青タンを作ったことなど想像もできません。
In the end, everything turns out fine. Overall, do I recommend the book and or the movie? I mean, honestly, yes, I do recommend both. The movie's definitely faster. The book sometimes kind of goes off into tangents for a page or so, but it's more about illustrating Momoko's train of thought and sort of giving background information to how she thinks, as well as just sort of framing the different elements of the story. So it's not that it's not without meaning, but it is kind of, it feels a little bit fillery at times. Like the author was just kind of going on a tangent and just kind of left it in. Yeah, I mean, it's not really super deep story. It's not super involved. I haven't figured out how it fits in the Marvel Cinematic Universe yet. I'm still working on that. But it's fun. It's lighthearted. I would honestly recommend it for a Discord stream viewing if you're doing that with your comm at all, for just something fun to do on a Friday night. The movie's less than 2 hours long, so you could just set it up, everyone like bring some popcorn, someone stream it. My copy of the movie, I do have the Blu-ray copy. It's actually a Korean release. Korean DVDs and Blu-rays are region 1, so they will play fine in US built Blu-ray players. It worked fine on mine. I rewatched the movie just to refresh my memory because it had been a few years, and I had no playback issues at all. Plus, I like this cover, and I feel like American covers for movies and things are always like just super generic, and this is just really cute, simple cover. The inside is cute too. It's just Momoko, she's just vibing. And apparently the same director that did Memories of Matsuko did Kamikaze Girls. If you haven't seen Memories of Matsuko, watch it when you need a good cry. Like, if you haven't cried in a while and you gotta work that out, like, that's when you want to watch it, because Jesus Christ, you will cry. Every outfit in this film is iconic.
Yes, queen! Yes, queen! Yes, queen!
One of the things that they did for Momoko's actress, Kyoko Fukada, was that they brought in the pieces, a lot of Baby the Star Shine Bright, obviously Sameta, Jane Marple, etc., and then they kind of just let her pick what she would wear. So the pieces are great because they do feel cohesive, but they also feel like something that you would kind of put together from your own closet. They don't feel over designed. It just feels very natural to her as a character. And even just her look overall, like her hair's very relaxed. She has a hime cut and her hair's sort of done, I think the color, I think they usually call it like milk tea or something. I'm sorry if I'm getting the colors wrong, but it just feels very soft, very natural, and it's just very simple. She's not like wearing a giant twin tail wig. She doesn't have fake lashes on. Don't come for me. And it's just very simple. Like, this is doable, is to wear Lolita every day in this way where it's just very simple pieces. A lot of times she's not even wearing a socks or blouse. So like little judging a little bit. She's even wearing like open-toed shoes at one time, you guys. Her striped OP with the pink hat. I fucking love that dress so much. I don't know why. I'm obsessed with it. It's so classy and simple, but it's just really elegant. I've always been obsessed with it. I'm still obsessed with it. Honestly, Ichiko looks kind of fucking great too. Like, it's the two moods for me. You have a super dolled up Lolita, and then you have just a slouchy, like, tracksuit. Baby did actually do an official release of the embroidered dress, of course. They did it in quite a few colors, and it was up on Closet Child for a while. They had white, obviously. I believe they also did it in pink, red, and black. It went for quite a lot. They only did like a limited run because obviously embroidery is expensive to do all that, especially on the ruffle details and everything. But it's like, I still think it's a cute dress. I don't know if I would necessarily wear it myself, but I still really like that working with texture and design details that aren't just ink printed onto fabric. I think that that's really charming. And yes, I know I'm wearing a printed jumper skirt right now. All right, like, get off my nut. I kind of wish we could bring back embroidery into Lolita a little bit more, even if it's just details or simple border things, anything like that, because I just think it gives something different. I also really like the soundtrack. The running joke now is that when you have a Lolita meetup or a Lolita event, it's obligatory to use the Marie Antoinette soundtrack, but I would say that the Kamikaze Girls soundtrack fits better. And of course it does, because it was meant to reflect a punk attitude and a Lolita attitude. I don't know. I like the soundtrack more. It's a really nice mix of soft piano interludes as well as some brassier overtures to sort of set up the clash between the soft romantic Lolita fashion as well as the sort of very bold and in-your-face Yanki personality, which I think is a really fun juxtaposition. They do also have a few songs in there by Tommy Heavenly Six, one of the J-pop bands that was around at the time. There is a playlist of the soundtrack on YouTube that's available, so I do recommend looking it up. Even just putting it on as background music. I don't know, it's really fun. It's just a fun soundtrack. I actually tried to use it in my videos. I used it in the first one where I talk about In the Starlight, and I got a copyright claim. So they're aware. Like, they keep an eye on it. Why they haven't put it on Spotify, I don't know. Now, there are some differences between the book and the movie, of course. Refreshingly, to anyone who has ever loved a book or a book series and then gone and seen a movie adaptation of it and been sorely disappointed, this one is actually pretty good about that, which is a relief. And probably because there's not a lot of material in the book, so there wasn't a lot that they had to like cut or mash together or mash down for a movie. It was a lot easier to just make it more concise, so I'm assuming that helped quite a bit. Most of the things are pretty small, like Momoko starts selling the knockoffs through Ichiko to all of Ichiko's bike members, which helps her to get quite a bit of money. The biggest change is that Emma, the embroidery shop in Daikaniyama, it does not exist in the movie. It was all just kind of a ruse. It does exist in the book, but the legendary embroiderer who used to do Yanki item has long since retired and passed. So that was kind of the biggest change there. I mean, it's not super important. It's kind of important to the end. It's kind of like, okay, well, why the hell did Ichiko even make Momoko go on this crazy ass goose chase anyway? And I think it was just because she just wanted to hang out with her and goof around for the day and was too afraid to say that.
だっておめえが今なんて存在しねえみたいに言うからついムキになって
Ichiko doesn't get a modeling job at the end of the book. She gets it sort of in the middle after, again, punching Isobe in the face or whatever. So it's the conflict of her modeling jobs and working part-time at a bike garage and spending more time with Momoko that starts to get her kind of called out by her biker gang at the end. is like, you're missing meetings, you're constantly at work instead of, coming and hanging out with us hoodlums. Meh, 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 meh. You're turning into a responsible person. We don't like that. Momoko does continue to play pachinko. We don't see a lot of it throughout the movie. We see her kind of going to it when she just needs something dumb and easy to do, to kind of think. But she does play it pretty significantly throughout the book, and that's part of how she's able to save up to then go to Baby and buy a bunch of items that she wants. To be honest, I haven't finished rereading the book. I'm almost halfway through. Like I said before, the book is kind of some freeform essays and tangents about embroidery and the Rococo period and sort of what it means for, like, sort of Momoko's thought process that she's a lone Lita, she doesn't really care, she don't need no friends, etc. It's a very light read. Like, if you just want to relax and just read something that you don't have to think too hard about for a few hours, I do recommend it for sure for that. Just something enjoyable, like, especially on a day like today, it's 80 friggin' degrees out and I'm all dolled up in 6 layers, whatever. If you want to like just hang out on a beach or on a park bench or something and just read for a bit. I haven't found it as an audiobook. And the book and the movie, the DVD at least, the American release, are available on thriftbooks.com. I looked into it, so you can get it that way. There was also a manga adaptation of the book, which I haven't personally read. I doubt it's that different from the book, honestly, and it just seems weird to... A manga just sounds really weird to me. I'd rather watch the movie or read the book, honestly. There was something about turning it into a manga that just, it doesn't make sense to me, really. There was, in fact, a sequel to Kamikaze Girls as well in 2005, where I believe the plot was they had to solve a murder. It hasn't been translated into English as far as I know, so I haven't been able to read it. That premise is not what I expected. So let's talk a little bit about the author of Kamikaze Girls, who is Novala Takemoto. He was an icon for a while after releasing Kamikaze Girls, as well as multiple other books and essays that featured Lolita characters. He was featured in the Gothic Lolita Bibles. He had multiple collaboration releases with Baby the Starshine Bright. He also did some custom Hello Kitties with Sanrio. So he was a big deal. He also had his own fashion line called Novala. Some of his other books that feature Lolita characters was Missin in 2000, Emily in 2002, and Lolita in 2004. I don't believe any of these have been translated into English at this time, so unfortunately I'm not able to read them. He's also written many essays on sort of what being a Lolita means to him and how to be the perfect Lolita. Some of these have actually been translated by fans and were posted to the LiveJournal community. A few were done even by the irreplaceable the Osaka Koneko. She actually has met Novala a couple of times. He signed a Baby Novala collab skirt for her. He was a huge deal. He was on the same level as Mana at the time. Like, he did interviews in the GLBs. He did like cover shoots for, I believe, Kara, the punk magazine. He was everywhere. So what happened to him? In 2007, he was arrested for possession of marijuana. He was sentenced to 8 months in jail. Because of this, Baby immediately cut all ties with him and canceled any future collaborations with him, pulling all merchandise from the shelves. And that was kind of it. It's kind of a bullshit ending, honestly, especially looking back now in 2021. Like, in the town I live in, there's like 3 or 4 head shops like right up the road, and they're like legal businesses at this point. So that's kind of hilarious. And I know obviously Japan has far stricter drug laws than the US does, which is hilarious. And the funny thing about it too was that every time it got brought up on the EGL forum, there would always be a fight in the comments about whether or not to legalize marijuana, because you did have a lot of straight-laced girls who clung to Lolita fashion as a sort of reflection of their conservative values, and you had your more rebellious punk girls who wanted to be kawaii and wanted to look cute, but were doing it for the edginess of, again, going back to that idea of malicious compliance in the fashion. It's just funny to look back and see how much things have changed. Like, it wasn't even like a big amount either. I think I saw the number at one point while doing my research. It was like 0.22 grams, which, like, how much even is that? Like, first off, grams, let me look at my phone. He also had a deal at one point with the old store Tokyo Rebel, which had an agreement with a lot of J fashion shops to carry their lines, similar to like Kuroshiro Kawaii nowadays. And so they were actually in talks with Novala to carry his line Novalar. Overall, yes, I do recommend either the movie or the book. The movie is great for, especially if you're trying to do something with your comm that still won't compromise the lockdowns. I do recommend doing a Discord stream of the movie. If you want to do something on your own, just kind of chill, then I do recommend the book. Like I said, it's not a super heavy book. Like, it's not Game of Thrones, so it's not gonna, like, you know, just overwhelm you with plot and characters and story and blah blah blah. It's just a really simple short story about two girls who find each other and who are their own form of rebellion and unite in that form of rebellion against everyone else. So that's just a very rough history on Kamikaze Girls and Novala Takemoto. I'm really glad I finally get back to making videos again. Sorry, I know it's been a little while. Hopefully this is a lot shorter video than the others have been. I hope you enjoyed it. I was really glad for the excuse to rewatch Kamikaze Girls because it has been a while for me. It felt really good. It really took me back to being a newbie Lolita and trying to figure out what this fashion was all about and how I could use it to be more true to myself and sort of express my inner self a little more. And it was really good to get back to that and just kind of relax and enjoy something. Could have used more superheroes, I guess. No, it could not have. So definitely, like, if you can find a copy, I do recommend it. You know, it's usually not that expensive to find. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, get your vaccines if you haven't yet, and take care.